Welcome to Love Thy Lawyer, where we talk to practicing attorneys about their lives in and out of the practice of law. I'm Goodman, the host of the show, and yes, I'm a lawyer. Nobody's perfect. She has vigorously defended the rights of the criminally accused for over 25 years. From her office in Berkeley, she has appeared in courts throughout the Bay Area. She has extensive volunteer experience and currently serves on the board of the Rasa Lawyers Association. She is currently running for judge of the Alameda County Superior Court, and her name will appear on the November ballot. Elena Condes, welcome to Love Thy Lawyer.
Thank you, Louis. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm very honored and pleased that you're participating in this podcast. We certainly enjoy having people who have the kind of experience that you have, and also someone who is taking the opportunity to run for judge. Your office is in Berkeley, is that correct?
Yeah, I've had my office in Berkeley for a little over 20 years. I started with an office in downtown Oakland.
Now, I know you do criminal defense. Is that your primary practice area?
It is. It is. I do restraining orders. Oftentimes, they're sort of connected to the criminal cases that I have, but it is primarily criminal defense.
Where are you from originally?
Tucson, Arizona.
Is that where you went to high school?
It is.
Tell me a little bit about your high school experience.
Thanks. That's a good question. You know, it was a mixed experience.
In what way?
I was in school when Title IX came into effect, and so it was when our school had a junior varsity softball team, and so I joined that team. And by our senior year, we were the state champions in Arizona. Softball team was, and it was also a hard experience because I was outed when I was in high school. I was about 16, 17. And I come from a very traditional Mexican Catholic family. And so when I was outed, I had this choice to make about whether or not to be honest about who I was, knowing that there would be consequences to that or not, and sort of stay in the fold of the family. And I chose to be honest. And, and from there, I've been on my own. And so I used to at a donut shop. I made donuts at night. And got into the community college and started community college. And then from there transferred into the University of Arizona.
Well, let's explore that a little bit. When you say that you were outed, I assume you mean around your sexual orientation. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And what was your family's take on that?
Well, it wasn't positive. I was taken to see the priest, and the priest sat me down. And he made this Venn diagram, the thing with the three circles.
Yeah.
There's an intersection. And he told me, when you follow the church and your family, you're in this, the warm center of the Venn diagram, right? The warm center where everybody intersects. But if you stay the way you are and you essentially, if you stay queer, you're out here in the circle all alone. And so, that experience was a hard one because I'd grown up in the church. We have a lot of family in the border town of Nogales, and we spent a lot of time there with my grandmother and the old ladies going to church, and praying the rosary. And so that kind of rejection was really hard, but it formed who I was. And since then, I have always been one to never, step away from standing up for the truth and for what's right. And I think it formed me in a positive way, even though it was such a difficult experience.
So when you left Santa Rita High School, you went to Pima Community College.
Yeah, that's right.
What was that experience like?
It was fun because, when I left my parents' house, I had an apartment with a bunch of friends, and I was working nights making donuts for $5 an hour. And, you sort of see people who have been working in that kind of a job, for a good chunk of their life. And I thought, boy, if I don't get myself into college, that's me in 20 years, So yeah. I started taking classes, and I was a fine arts major first. And then, took a bunch of classes here and there until, I was in a class. It was a criminal justice class that I just took. There was this sanctuary movement that was going on in Tucson at the time. And people from El Salvador, I think Guatemala, were coming through Mexico and into the Arizona border when the wars were going on down there. And so there were a lot of refugees in Tucson. And there are a lot of people dying in the desert, much like they are today. And there were some priests in Tucson who were giving them sanctuary, were giving them water and food and housing when they arrived in Tucson, and were going to the desert and leaving water for them. And those priests were getting prosecuted. One of the lawyers that represented those priests came to talk to the class. And, there are no lawyers in my family. And in my mother's side of the family, I was the first girl to go to college. So the lawyer that came in to talk about representing the priests and the work that they were doing, that really struck me. Wow, there is something I could spend my life doing. It is righteous work. You are standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves and who are protecting other people. And that's for me.
So it sounds like you've had kind of a mixed relationship with the Catholic Church and with priests. In other words, some of them have been people who are like real mentors to you in a way, and others were people you had real differences with.
Yeah, and I think the difference is how they have chosen to follow their path.
Sure.
One was to condemn, and the other was to, for salvation for people. And so, you're absolutely right. There are both sides of that coin. And
what's your relationship with the Catholic Church now?
I don't have one. I would have to say that's probably the biggest regret in raising my daughter, because, there is something to those rituals. There is something to that having that sort of bigger than yourself sense of a divine that I don't think I was able to successfully give that to my daughter because of my conflicted experience with the church.
Now, it sounds like you decided to go to law school even before you went to the University of Arizona.
Yeah, that's correct.
When you graduated from the University of Arizona, did you go directly to law school?
No, I didn't. I didn't know what I was doing. So I graduated in August, so not in the traditional kind of end of June sort of thing. So I graduated in August, and then I applied for schools. And there weren't a ton of schools that started in the middle of the year, in the January term.
Right.
But I had been accepted to a couple of schools. One was in the Midwest, one was up north, and then one was Golden Gate University that had programs that started mid-year. So I went to Golden Gate University.
How did you like that experience?
I liked it. My first semester of law school was the first semester of any of my schooling where I wasn't working at the same time as I was going to school.
What did you think about being in San Francisco as opposed to being in Arizona?
As you can imagine, it's a lot different. That was a really great thing to see, and to when you come from where you've been all your life to someplace completely new, someplace that is open and accepting to everyone, you get to define who you are and who you're going to be, and you get an opportunity.
What was your first legal job after law school?
I was a law clerk my freshman year of law school in a construction law firm. And so that was my sort of quasi-legal job. I worked for this construction law firm second half of my freshman year, and I worked there for a bit.
Have you always sort of basically been on your own?
Yeah.
What do you really like about practicing law?
I really like all of the people I get to meet. You probably know this. You dive into somebody's life in the most difficult moments of their life. And you really get to see, the core of the human when they're in those positions. And so I really appreciate really getting to know people on a deep level for a short period of time and do that over and over again. for the last 26 years. I like that the best about it. I've met some wonderful, wonderful people.
So if someone was coming out of college, just graduating from the University of Arizona, and they were thinking about a career, would you recommend going to law school if they asked you?
I would. I mean, it is noble, righteous work. So I would recommend it. I think I can't imagine. Through the East Bay La Rasa Lawyers Association, we give out scholarships to Latinx law students in the East Bay. And when we see the applications, the scholarships that these kids have coming out of law school is just eye-watering. So I hope something changes in that respect soon, because there is no way I could have gone, I could go to law school now with the debt these kids carry.
Yeah, it's insanely expensive, certainly compared to when I went to law school. It's I mean, like you say, it's just mind-boggling the debt that people are carrying these days coming out of school. Let's talk about that La Rasa a little bit. Tell me a little bit about that organization and what got you interested in working with them.
The East Bay La Rasa Lawyers Association has been around, I think, since 1978. And, it is to sort of promote and support Latinx law students and lawyers.
How is practicing law either met or kind of different from your expectations as you were going into it?
Well, we didn't have any lawyers in my family, and I didn't know any, and so I didn't have any expectations really. I mean, I saw a little bit about how civil firms work when I was working during law school, but I can't say that I really had any expectations. But it's like everything else; it has ups and downs, and things I love about it, things I'm not crazy about.
Can you think of a case or a person that you really feel you helped out?
I had a case. It was a woman, a Latina woman, who she had a daughter who was about 6 years old. By the time the case went to trial, her daughter was a little bit older. She was about 8 or something like that. But my client was a victim of severe domestic violence. She was charged along with the co-defendant, her boyfriend, and they had 2 kids in common, those two. And she was charged with a failure to protect her child as a felony, and he was charged with torture of the girl. We went to trial with a battered women syndrome defense, and she walked out of there with a not guilty and was able to be reunited with her kids because, the kids were taken away from her when the case started. She was breastfeeding her youngest baby when she was arrested.
Yeah, those are really brutal cases. I've had a few of them, and they're just heartbreaking, aren't they?
Yeah, because she was as much a victim as her daughter was. And she was doing the best she could just to keep everybody alive. And so it was really satisfying for the jury to see her for who she was.
Let's talk a little bit about the business of practicing law. How's that gone for you? Because, being in private practice and being on your own involves being a business person in addition to being an attorney.
Well, I have to say that's probably been the easier part of it because I ran a business. After I made donuts for a while, I managed a few donut shops while I was in undergrad. And so I knew how to run a business by the time I got to this business.
You are currently running for judge. When did you start thinking about that as a career move?
I'll say over the many years of being in the East Bay La Rasa Lawyers Association, what we have seen is that there are a lot of good Latinx, Latino and Latina lawyers who have put their name in over the years to be appointed by the governor. And we weren't, not seeing the numbers, those numbers going up. I mean, Alameda County is 23% Latino, and there's only 13% of the judges on the bench are Latinx. 3% are Latinas. And so, I started thinking about You probably have heard the old Shirley Chisholm quote that if they won't give you a seat at the table, you bring a folding chair. So I started thinking, well, that is how we bring up the numbers. If there's not a path, instead of waiting to be invited to the table, we get to the table on our own. And so I feel like I have an opportunity for, to show other young Latinx that there is a path for them. And this is one of them. So that they belong.
Go ahead. Have you always kind of wanted to be a judge and thought of yourself as a judge?
Not so much. Not that I wasn't paying attention before, but just sort of seeing the effects that judges have on people's lives. And, particularly when, judges don't really have some judges don't have the lived experience of the people who are coming in front of them. And I think it makes a real difference in how a person is seen, if they're just so different from their experience. So I think it's always been, for the last several years that I've been thinking about it, more of a way to serve, given my experience, and the sort of depth of knowledge of the law and my experience in the county. I thought this is a nice way to serve, and I wanted to try that.
How's the campaign going?
It's going great. I came in first and highest vote getter in the primary. Been endorsed by Judge Brosnahan, who's retiring after 40 years, which was a real honor. And I've been endorsed by 32 other judges in Alameda County, which is humbling because they know me, and so to have their endorsement is really meaningful. So it's been great. People have been so kind and supportive, and that's been really nice. Because I've always been on my own, I haven't had that sort of office environment. Like I don't come from, an office full of people. So this has been a really nice process to kind of connect with people that I don't normally connect with. So I'm really enjoying it.
How about raising money? How's that gone for you?
It's going fine. I think many women have this problem of asking for money for themselves. So that part is hard. That's probably the hardest part of this whole thing, is asking somebody to give me money. But it's really for, it's for the candidacy. It's to diversify the bench. It's for much more than me, but it is still me that is asking. And so that's hard. I just think that there must be a way, particularly for the judicial race, where you can do it without having to raise so much money. Because, it's the one office where you probably want the least amount of money in it, and it's the one that has the highest limit, which makes no sense.
Yeah, I know. A lot of it is like that. I mean, as you know, I ran for judge a few years ago, and I found the amount of money involved to be just staggering. Yeah. And I found the campaigning process to be just different than, really anything that I'd ever been involved with in my entire life. And as you say, some of it was kind of fun and some of it was just grueling. And so that's why I ask these questions. I'm really curious as to what your take on it is.
Yeah. The transactional nature of relationships in politics is disappointing. I got to say that I don't like much at all.
Yeah. Do you have an elevator speech?
Pretty much. It changes depending on who I'm in the elevator with.
Well, let's hear it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm running for judge. I've been a criminal defense attorney for 26 years in the courts in Alameda County, and I've represented the most vulnerable in our community, ordinary people in their worst moments, and make sure that their constitutional rights are protected. More than 50% of people who come into court come without a lawyer. I've served as a judge pro tem, and I know that it matters when the judge making decisions about the most important things in their life understands their lived experience. I'm the first Latinx to run for judge in Alameda County, and if elected, I'll be the first Latina lesbian on the bench. My experience, depth of knowledge of the law, and perspective are why I was a lead vote getter in the primary. That's about 30 seconds, I think. Kind of goes on.
All right. I wasn't timing it, but it was nice and concise. Speaking of being on the bench, you sat pro tem a bit, haven't you?
It was back in, I think it was around 2005, 2006.
What kind of cases?
Oh, small claims in traffic.
I've sat pro tem a lot in mainly traffic, a little bit of small claims.
Uh-huh.
And
Did you like it?
yeah, I do it all the time, and I enjoy it. But the thing that strikes me the most is how different that courtroom looks from the bench. Have you noticed that?
In what way?
Well, all eyes are on you, and people really expect you to kind of know what's going on and know the right answers.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and and then you look out over the people who are there, and you really are oftentimes being asked to make some decision that to them at that moment is really important in their lives. And I find it to be a position of great responsibility.
Yes, for sure.
What, if anything, would you change in the way the legal system works?
I would say to make access easier for people there are so many ways that people have huge barriers to utilizing the justice system. So I would make access easier.
Do you think the system is fair? Do you think it dispenses justice?
I genuinely believe in the potential of our system of justice. And I think many, many times it gets it right, and so many times it does not.
What other sort of things do you like to do? Recreation or travel or any other things that you do besides practicing law?
Yeah, I like to be outside a lot. Yeah, I do. For a while, I was doing adventure races, which is a ton of fun.
What's that?
It's orienteering, mountain bike riding, kayaking, and trail running. And so
Wow.
you show up, you get a blank, a topo map, and then you're given the coordinates of these checkpoints that you have to get to. And sometimes you figure out, which ones you get first, but you get all the checkpoints and you come back and it's a race, and whoever gets all the checkpoints or the most checkpoints and gets back wins. And it's through kayaking, mountain bike racing, trail running, and the orienteering. It's the best fun.
Wow, that sounds great. Elena Condes, thank you so much for joining me today on Love Thy Lawyer. It's been a very interesting conversation. I wish you the best of luck in your judicial campaign.
Thank you so much, Louis. It's been a genuine pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of Love Thy Lawyer. Many thanks to my guests who have contributed their time and wisdom and make this show possible. Thanks as always to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Louis Goodman. Can we back up for a second, Louis? Sure.
Can I
Sure.
something?